Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
One of the things that shocked me was that British Columbia is sending money to the federal government so they can send it to Ontario.
The Premier says he may try to join a lawsuit against Ottawa over equalization payments ahead of a fall provincial election.
Mr. Eby can say that he is standing up to Ottawa on behalf of British Columbians.
Plus,
we'd like to obviously prevent other people from being victimized by this suspect.
Vancouver police search for a suspect accused of violently attacking a sex worker. And layoff notices. Van City announces it is firing hundreds of staff.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. BC's Premier says he may take his fight with Ottawa over federal funding to court. David Eby says he will look at joining a lawsuit brought by Newfoundland and Labrador over equalization payments. Mira Bain says more on Eby's surprise announcement months before the provincial election.
The way Premier David Eby sees it, BC is shipping taxpayers' dollars to the federal government, and in turn, Ottawa is giving them to someone else.
And one of the things that shocked me was that British Columbia is sending money to the federal government so they can send it to Ontario.
Eby and Newfoundland and Labrador's premier seem to bond over equalization payments at a housing announcement. Equalization payments are a federal program that sends federal dollars to provinces with below-average capacities to raise revenue. Provinces with stronger economies don't receive transfers. BC does not. Furey's government receives a small amount and launched a court challenge last month over Ottawa's equalization formula.
A court needs to evaluate how this is being applied across jurisdictions, British Columbia and all provinces for all Canadians.
Eby says Ontario received almost $500 million in equalization funding last year, while BC got none. He says they may try to join the lawsuit.
Based on our population, that whatever the federal program is, that we get a fair share of that federal program. Could be migrants, could be economic development, could be housing.
This comes after a tense public exchange between Eby and Canada's immigration minister. Mark Miller clapped back at Eby's suggestion that Quebec received $750 million in funding for asylum seekers, while the western provinces fight for scraps.
First and foremost, the disproportionate flow of asylum seekers has in fact occurred in Quebec and Ontario.
But Eby claims 10,000 people arrive in BC every 37 days. The CEO of Success, an immigrant support agency, says people who arrive in Ontario and Quebec sometimes migrate west.
Perhaps for the secondary migration, those people who maybe perhaps landed in Quebec but decided to come to British Columbia.
One political watcher says Eby's charge at the federal government during an election season is a time-honored tradition.
To fight against Ottawa, that is a common path to electoral victory for premiers across the country.
Still, David Eby will have to wait another 4 months to find out if his attack on the federal government will help him keep his provincial power. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
One of BC's best-known credit unions is firing hundreds of workers. Van City says it is laying off 7% of its staff, or almost 200 employees. It says it made the decision to better align with, quote, market conditions and to better serve its members. Van City says it will continue health, dental, and insurance plans for impacted employees for 3 months after they're fired, and they will receive an extra month of TELUS Health virtual care services. In March, Van City reported an operating income of almost $500 million for 2023, but more in total expenses. It runs more than 50 branches across the South Coast. Vancouver police are issuing a warning after they say someone violently attacked a sex worker on the downtown east side. Police say a man picked up the woman after midnight on Monday near East Hastings and Campbell Avenue in an older model dark-colored sedan. The VPD says the suspect then assaulted the woman with a weapon inside the car and pushed her out near Oppenheimer Park.
The suspect in this case is a white man between 40 and 50 years old with a heavy build, approximately 300 pounds. He has balding or receding hairline and was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants at the time of the offense.
Two passersby were able to help the victim and called 911. Police say the woman has received medical attention and is recovering from her physical injuries. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. Burnaby RCMP, meanwhile, are on the lookout for a 20-year-old suspect they say was involved in the assault on another man on Wednesday. It happened on a trail in Central Park around 8 in the morning. Police said the suspect told the 55-year-old victim to leave the area he was walking through. When the victim didn't, police said the suspect attacked him with a wooden stick. Police described the suspect as an Indigenous man with short hair, wearing a white shirt with black letters printed on it and dark pants. The victim is in hospital with what are said to be significant head and arm injuries. The BC government has announced several new changes meant to protect gig workers. It includes guaranteeing them a new hourly wage and increased job safety. As Saurabh Sandhu reports, the announcement is the support of some drivers, but companies are worried.
Starting September of this year, the province says any ride-hailing driver or gig worker delivering food must receive $20.88 an hour from the time they accept an assignment to the time it is completed.
The people who deliver food for these app-based services are often right on the edge. They're really struggling with their costs and everything else. That's why we support a decent minimum wage in this province.
The government says the change comes after it held a series of meetings with gig workers across BC to hear about their experiences and concerns.
We hear that from the drivers over and over again. The cost of the work that they have to do, ensuring that they're able to do their jobs, is costly.
Among the major changes, platform companies like Uber and Skip the Dishes will now be required to provide all pickup and delivery locations within 300 meters. And will be required to inform a worker in writing of the reason for a suspension or deactivation of their account.
There is going to be some transparency, particularly for the workers, so they know, what the work they're going to be doing and how they're going to be paying for it.
The new rules also required all ride-hailing service and delivery workers to be covered through WorkSafe BC.
Now we are not protected at all, and we need that baseline to continue working on this.
You don't work like by hour. You have to make more orders and then you can make more.
In a written statement, Uber says change will drive up the cost for residents and reduce demand on local restaurants and earning opportunities for workers. Skip the Dishes adds it has concerns over what it calls rushed changes without a proper study beforehand. But the message from Victoria remains clear.
These companies can suck it up. They'll be all right. They'll be fine. And we expect them to. And British Columbians will use the service that provides the most cost-competitive service for them.
The province says the new regulations come into effect on September 3rd, making an impact on about 11,000 ride-hailing drivers and 35,000 delivery workers across BC. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you camp in BC, and many people do, you know it can be a huge challenge to book a spot. Now the province says a person has been caught trying to scalp camping reservations at popular sites near Squamish. As Michelle Gomez reports, they were reportedly trying to resell coveted spots online for a mint.
When you hear scalping, concert tickets or sporting events may come to mind. Well, this summer, some people are scalping campsite reservations at provincial parks in BC. One individual was caught this week reselling reservations at Porto Cove and Alice Lake, according to BC's Environment Ministry. Both are popular sites just off the Sea to Sky Highway, with almost all campsites reserved for most of the summer.
Which really makes me mad. I mean, that seems to be our world now, right? There's so many people that will do whatever just to make a buck.
Screenshots posted online show a Facebook Marketplace listing selling reservations at Alice Lake for the full reservation cost plus a $40 fee. The listing appears to have been taken down since.
And of course, for all the people that are just trying to come out and go camping and enjoy themselves, can't get a spot because people are scooping them up.
Dave Hubbard has camped at Porto Cove with his wife every summer for the past 4 years. This year, his wife was not able to come on the full trip because he couldn't get a spot on the weekend.
Here, it's really, really difficult to get a campsite, though, so I spend literally months, trying to go online and trying to be that lucky person that gets a campsite.
Karen Brees was shocked to learn about the reselling after she and her husband were turned away from the full campground.
We've been traveling a long time, so Now we have to turn around and find somewhere else.
After hearing what had happened, others at the park were not happy campers.
I'm like, whoa, that's actually pretty crazy. Like, that's not fair. Sometimes people just want to do that to get rich. I really don't think that's worth it.
That's just wrong. It's wrong on many levels. Kind of used to it. Ticketmaster, resales. I mean, it's the way things work these days, you know. It's too bad, but...
BC Park says it has canceled the scalpers' reservations without refund. It says proof of identity is required at campsites and is warning the public to not purchase reservations from any sources other than the official website or authorized travel agents. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Porto Cove.
The City of Victoria is going to court to permanently ban a local property management company from running short-term rentals in that city. It claims the business has been operating illegally. Court documents say Amala Vacation Rental Solutions and its CEO, Angela Mason, are still managing 4 condos in Victoria's downtown core, a zoning area which doesn't allow short-term rentals. Along with calling for a permanent ban, the city also wants a court order to allow city staff to go into the condos for daytime inspections for 2 years, as long as they provide 24 hours notice. The case is the latest in a legal fight over BC's new short-term rental laws. Mason is part of a group challenging the new law that restricts short-term rentals to a homeowner's principal residence. Kamloops City Council is cutting its mayor's salary by 10% for up to 6 months. Mayor Reed Hamer Jackson allegedly violated code of conduct rules and refused to sign a written apology. The CBC's Marcella Bernardo spoke with our Benit Brach earlier about what's happening.
Well, essentially, it's been part of a conflict that's been brewing with the mayor for more than a year now, since he took office in the fall of 2022. And he was accused of violating the code of conduct rules involving another city councillor, which we believe was Councillor Katie Newstater. And she's the person that he's suing for defamation involving comments that she made about him last year on behalf of all of City Council. So it came to a head a few months ago when council basically ordered him to write a written apology, or else he would face financial penalties. That hasn't happened, and now they've gone to the point where they've said they're going to garnish 10% of his wages for the next 6 months until he apologizes. So we're waiting now to see what comes of this, but the mayor has made it clear he's not going to apologize. He says he's done nothing wrong, and if he was in it for the money, he wasn't planning to run for mayor for the money. So even though he made about $129,000 last year, he says losing that 10% is not going to hurt him.
All right, so he's still losing some money there. What's going to happen with the money?
Well, I just heard back from city staff. I was asking them last night what's going to happen with it, and they've basically said it's going to go back into variance spending, so it'll just go back into their general revenue budgets until that point where the mayor might apologize. It's only 1 month at a time, I guess, that they're doing this, and so we'll have to wait now to see if he apologizes, which doesn't sound like he will. And in the meantime, the mayor has announced that he's going to be selling some commercial property he owns in the city to possibly help pay for all the legal fees attached to everything that's been happening with him over the past year.
Marcella Bernardo speaking with Benit Brach. If you live in Pitt Meadows, you might be seeing some new lawn signs popping up this summer. Take a look. They're part of a citywide initiative to promote water conservation, reading, "This lawn isn't dying, it's going dormant." They're meant to show neighbors that while your lawn might be looking a little worse for wear, you're actually doing your part to not waste drinking water, especially after an historically low snowpack.
We really need everyone to do their part and just be a bit more mindful, just to think where their water's going and how they can reduce their consumption.
Pitt Meadows mayor says in the summer, the region's water use can rise by 50% or more, mainly due to excess lawn watering. The signs are free and can be recycled when the watering restrictions are lifted, or if you pick one up, save it for next year. Saving the water. Darius Madavi joins us with a first look at the weather. Probably a good idea as we deal with that ongoing drought.
Yes, and I'm not surprised to hear that water use shoots up so much. I mean, a third of all water use in the U.S., residential water use, goes to lawns, which is a lot. and we use more water on lawns than any agricultural crop in North America. So, not that surprised. And if you want to learn more lawn facts, I'm going to shamelessly promote our story from last week, which you can find on cbc.ca/BC or YouTube. Now, if we take a look at the weather across the province, temperature is going to drop tomorrow across BC, drop some more on Saturday, and then probably continue very similarly into Sunday. Temperatures will then start to rebound on Monday, but it'll be a while before they come back up to where they are, but eventually we will get there. In terms of the rain that's coming across the south coast, it'll look pretty similar to Vancouver. The time will be a bit different, but it's just really scattered for tomorrow in the morning and then afternoon, sort of a mix of sun and cloud. And then across the province, very similar, a bit of rain, especially Friday and Saturday, widespread before things start to dry out early next week.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The Kelowna Rockets say they are planning to put in a bid to host the 2026 Memorial Cup. The Western Hockey League is scheduled to host the Cup in May 2026. Kelowna last hosted the tournament in 2004 and won that year. The Rockets plan on upgrading Prospera Place Arena as well.
And bringing this event back to our city will not only bring an excitement around our home team, our arena, and our loyal fan base, but for years to come, but also bring significant economic and social benefits to our community.
The 2026 Memorial Cup would be the 106th edition of the tournament, which brings together the playoff champions from 3 leagues as well as the host team. He's Canada's most celebrated architect, known for gems like Robson Square, among others. But coming up, we're going to take you inside a lesser-known masterpiece in Burnaby. You'll want to see this. Friday marks the 100th birthday of famed Vancouver architect Arthur Erickson. Among the many highlights of his career, buildings like the Museum of Anthropology at UBC, the original campus buildings of SFU, and of course Robson Square. But there's one small building in Burnaby you may not know about. Our Caroline Chen went to check out a very unique little house on Deer Lake.
So if you've ever walked along Deer Lake in Burnaby, you've probably seen this house. It's called the Baldwin House, and we've got a special treat. We're gonna go inside. Come on. Hi.
Hi, Caroline. I'm Lisa Cott. I'm the Heritage Planner here at the City of Burnaby.
And where are we right now?
We are sitting in the corner of the living room at the Baldwin House. This is an Arthur Erickson designed house on the shores of Deer Lake. And while most houses' walls are solid, the walls of the Baldwin House are made of glass with an expansive view of Deer Lake on a beautiful sunny day. Yeah, it was definitely a goal of the original owners of the house, Dr. William and Ruth Baldwin, as well as the architect Arthur Erickson, that this house blend into the environment. So the furniture, feels very open and light. It's very low profile, so it's also just preserving the view. The Baldwin House is 2 levels. Above the dining room is the roof is basically made of glass. There's a very large skylight. When you're standing here at the sink, you have this full view of the lake. I feel like I actually wouldn't mind doing the dishes here. I have a daughter, and a few years ago she was here at Deer Lake on a summer camp, and they canoed out. And she came home and was telling me about this amazing glass house that she saw, and then I got to talk about what I do. And she'd never before actually been interested in my work. And she wanted to see pictures of it. When you're outside, you want to be inside. And when you're inside, you feel like you're outside.
My part of the portfolio is that it actually includes the Artist in Residence program here.
And this is where they live, right?
Yes, so this is utilized, I'd say 80% of the year. Hundreds that have come through and lived here for the last, I'd say 4 years since we started using this house, in particular for the Artist in Residence program.
How do you find yourself here living in the Baldwin House?
I found myself here because I am participating in the Artist in Residency here at Deer Lake. So I applied to live here for a month, and the powers that be granted me this wonderful request. And so I'm here for the month of June working on a memoir, a book that I actually started 2 years ago while I was also at this residency.
So this is your second time?
This is my second time. I love it here. I love living on the water. I love being able to walk around the park every day, sometimes 2 times a day. And I love living in this glass house where I feel so, integrated into nature. It's really, really soothing for the nervous system. It's really fueling for creativity. Also just, like we were living in a housing crisis, just having access to such a beautiful home is mind-blowing. It really is the gift of space. And then this is such a unique home. But I didn't know a whole lot about it. And then I saw that it had been built by Arthur Erickson and learned a little bit about that. And I was like, oh, yeah. So, but even like looking it up online doesn't really prepare you for walking in through those doors and seeing like this like glass panoramic view. Like, yeah, you can't capture that. And it's such a visceral experience.
After a bombshell report last week alleged some MPs helped foreign governments meddle in Canadian politics, the NDP leader says he has concerns. More on what they are after this. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he is more concerned than ever about foreign interference after a report last week alleged some MPs helped foreign governments meddle in Canadian politics. Singh has now read the unredacted report from the NSICOP, and his impression is very different from that of the Green Party leader. Evan Dyer has more from Ottawa.
Jagmeet Singh is the second party leader to read the report and share his thoughts on what it says, at least as much as he can, without falling afoul of national security laws.
I am not relieved after reading this report. I am more concerned today than I was yesterday.
Singh's take on the report is very different from that of Elizabeth May.
After having read the report, I am more convinced than ever of the conclusions of the NSICOP committee and the report, that some parliamentarians are, in the words of the intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. In short, there are a number of MPs who have knowingly provided help to foreign governments, some to the detriment of Canada and Canadians.
Singh had harsh criticism for PM Trudeau, who he said was sending a message that Canada's willing to tolerate some foreign interference, and even harsher words for Pierre Poilievre for not wanting to learn more about foreign interference in his own party.
He doesn't want to know about very disturbing allegations directly connected to his party that India, among other countries, were involved in foreign interference in leadership races.
And we have one leader who either can't get security clearance or refuses to get security clearance. He has not explained to Canadians why he cannot get security clearance. What kind of leader is refusing to understand the threats to our country?
Madam Speaker, I would call him the member for Timmins James Bay, but I'm not sure he's ever actually been to Timmins, actually. He doesn't live in the riding.
While Poilievre offered no rationale for his refusal to get clearance, the Conservatives' foreign affairs critic said other parties are wrong to say Poilievre could use the knowledge to expel compromised candidates.
In the Conservative caucus, a decision to expel is based on a secret ballot vote of the majority of members of Parliament in that caucus.
Of course, it wouldn't be necessary to expel a member to keep him or her from running. All that would be required would be a refusal to sign nomination papers.
And I do not buy his phony excuses.
But Conservatives say it's up to the PM and not their party to take action.
This is the responsibility of the Prime Minister. He has the authority to do it. He did it last September when he released highly classified information concerning the killing of a Canadian citizen, Mr. Nidger, in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver. He did that on the floor of the House of Commons. He should do it again.
Chong agrees with Singh's reading of the report rather than Elizabeth May's more optimistic interpretation. He says even the unredacted version makes it clear that MPs have cooperated with foreign governments, including those of India and China. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
NDP MP Nikki Ashton is defending herself. She maintains she did nothing wrong after CBC News learned that taxpayers paid over $17,000 for a family trip she took to Quebec in 2022. As JP Tasker explains, Ashton claims the expenses were linked to her role as official languages critic.
NDP MP Nikki Ashton is rarely on Parliament Hill.
Wickedly wasteful at a time of a climate emergency.
Often participating over Zoom, that's allowed under pandemic-era rules that are now permanent.
It's clear the Liberals still don't get it.
But now she's in Ottawa facing pointed questions about travel expenses.
I just want to be clear here. I submitted these claims as any MP does. The House reimbursed me.
While she wasn't in Ottawa for most of the fall sitting in 2022, there was just one trip for 4 days. Ashton did take her partner and their 2 kids to Quebec City and Montreal over the Christmas holidays that year. CBC News found that 2-week trip cost taxpayers more than $17,000. Ashton and her family took part in winter activities.
Canada for the win!
Like sledding and snow tubing. Ashton says she was there on parliamentary business, meeting with stakeholders about the French language, but won't say exactly who.
I met with various people.
Who did you meet with on your trip, and what did you discuss with them?
I had the chance to meet with various people who are connected to the issue of French language, French culture preservation.
The NDP leader defended Ashton,
I expect all my MPs and all MPs in the House to follow those rules and submit claims. Those claims were submitted and approved.
While other MPs called her out.
Unbelievable. Merry Christmas to Nikki Ashton from the Canadian taxpayers.
This advocate for lower taxes says the price tag for Ashton's family trip is an outrage.
Maybe she could have saved taxpayers a whole bunch of money just by picking up the phone, doing this over Zoom, especially she's already doing her parliamentary procedures by Zoom.
This is just the latest parliamentary travel expense that's raised eyebrows. MPs have also been billing for tens of thousands of dollars worth of trips to party conventions. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is demanding the rules be tightened up. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Just days after reaching a tentative deal with Canada's border officers, Ottawa has announced it is expanding early pension eligibility for federal frontline workers. Here's Treasury Board President Anita Anand.
In the fall of 2024, we will introduce legislative changes to expand the eligibility for early pensions, specifically to frontline employees in the following groups: firefighters, paramedics, correctional service employees, border services officers, parliamentary protection officers, and search and rescue technicians.
A new national process could provide some vital information for people on the front lines of homelessness. It offers a standardized way to track deaths among people who are living on Canada's streets. This is data that most jurisdictions in this country do not collect. More now from Carissa Donkin.
They were someone's mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. It's hard to see them looking at us as nothing.
Sabrina Robichaud rides her bike to a mural in downtown Moncton every day. She made the mural to remember people who've died on the streets, many of whom were her friends. Robichaud doesn't have a home herself, but she still finds a way to record the names and track down photos from when they were alive. She keeps a list of everyone who's died on the streets over the last few years and says that list now includes more than 200 names of Moncton's precariously housed.
So we don't actually know exactly how many people have died while experiencing homelessness here in New Brunswick. The province just doesn't track that information, and most Canadian jurisdictions actually don't, with a couple of exceptions. But that could soon change. And that's because the Public Health Agency of Canada and Statistics Canada have come up with a new method of tracking residence type when someone dies. And coroners and medical examiners across the country could start tracking this information as soon as this summer, which is welcome news to Naomi Nichols, a researcher who's been trying to track this information in Peterborough, Ontario.
Having a better sense of the actual numbers of people who are losing their lives while they're homeless, even if homelessness is not the direct cause, but it has exacerbated their underlying health conditions, for example, I think is really important in terms of an evidence-led advocacy strategy.
Back at the mural in downtown Moncton, Robichaud says she sees struggle, love, and caring when she looks at the faces of the friends who she's lost.
I wish half of them knew how much they were loved and cared and how much they meant to people. A lot of us, we don't think we matter to a lot of people because most of our families and stuff pushed us away because of our addictions or our mental health or our struggles.
Carissa Donkin, CBC News, Moncton.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and other G7 leaders are in Italy and have agreed on a new deal to help Ukraine. They plan to use billions of dollars in frozen Russian assets to help Kyiv fund its ongoing war with Moscow. Ashley Burke explains.
The message from G7 leaders on day one: everything's falling into place, with a deal to help Ukraine in a new way. The Prime Minister promising a multi-billion-dollar loan to help Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's ongoing fight against Russia.
Canada is actually the first country to announce $5 billion of that will be a Canadian contribution.
They will help Ukraine not only on the battlefield, also in reconstruction.
Canada's contribution is part of a bigger $50 billion deal agreed to by all G7 leaders.
Today is a truly historic day.
The U.S.-led plan involves using the interest earned on profits from hundreds of billions of dollars of frozen Russian assets as collateral for a loan that would see countries get their money back.
To put that money to work for Ukraine. Another reminder to Putin, we're not backing down.
Russia's foreign ministry immediately fired back, calling it an illegal initiative and warning retaliatory measures will be inevitable and extremely painful. With Russia making gains on the battlefield, experts say Ukrainian troops need a lot more help, including from Canada.
There's also a big gap between what's been committed and what Ukraine actually needs, which is essentially more of everything.
At a meeting of Ukraine's allies in Belgium, Canada's defense minister announced more than 130,000 rounds of small arms ammunition, a remote weapon system, and motors for attack rockets for Ukraine.
Canada is beginning shipments of a new fleet of 50 armored vehicles to Ukraine.
Canada also announced new sanctions against those supplying key technology to help Russia's military. Pope Francis is expected to join G7 leaders for discussions on the dangers of artificial intelligence on Friday. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Bari, Italy.
Now, this latest global support is welcome news, but Ukraine has a growing domestic problem, dwindling numbers of troops. As Briar Stewart shows us, that country is now taking the extraordinary step of conscripting convicts to bolster its forces.
I'm at a prison colony just outside of Kyiv, and this is part of a plan by the Ukrainian government to try to bolster the military by recruiting inside prisons. They think that they can attract 20,000 additional soldiers this way. Now, as far as where I am, we can't reveal the exact location, and our access here was extremely limited. But what prison officials say is that about 100 inmates from this prison have already enlisted in the military. They've been released, and they've been sent to eastern Ukraine where they're getting training. And dozens of others are in the process of submitting applications. It's not just a simple matter of raising your hand and being released into the military. There is a small court process they have to go through, and there are certain eligibility criteria. For instance, Ukraine says that people convicted of certain crimes cannot enlist. So someone who is convicted of rape, of murdering 2 or more people, are not allowed to join the army on the front line. And so what we have is a process where you have a judge that basically signs off on applications. And after that, the prisoners are released into the custody of the military. They receive some kind of training and they're sent to the front. Now, the issue of having enough soldiers on the front line is a very big deal for Ukraine right now because the military men are dwindling. You don't have as many volunteers rush to sign up like you did at the beginning. And you have exhausted soldiers on the front line that need to be replaced. Now, Russia, of course, heavily relied on prisoners for part of their offensive, particularly in Bakhmut. Thousands of fighters were released from prisons and they joined the Wagner mercenary group. In Ukraine's case, once prisoners are released, they will have to stay fighting with the military until the war is over. Briar Stewart, CBC News, near Kyiv.
The U.S. Supreme Court has dismissed a case that tried to limit the availability of the commonly used abortion pill mifepristone. In a unanimous decision, the justices ruled the group that brought the suit does not have the legal standing to do so. A group of doctors had been challenging the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's decision to make the pill easier to get. It is the most used abortion medication in America and is widely available online and through the mail. The court's decision means access to the pill remains unchanged. In June 2022, the High Court did overturn the Roe v. Wade opinion that secured constitutional protections for abortion in the U.S. for almost half a century. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says a record number of people were forcibly displaced last year. The main cause? Widespread violence. The agency said it's the 12th straight yearly rise. Julia Wong has more from London.
The Refugee Agency says 117 million people were forced from their homes at the end of 2023 because of conflicts, persecution, and violence. And it estimates that as of April of this year, that number likely grew to more than 120 million. That's about the population of Egypt or the population of Japan. Here are some examples of what is driving those numbers. The UN says close to 11 million Sudanese were forcibly displaced at the end of 2023 because of violence in that country. Millions more have fled because of the war between Israel and Hamas, and there is displacement within and from Ukraine because of the ongoing conflict there. Many have found safety in UN-run centers. And they seem to be frustrated. There's little they can do about the violence pushing them from their homes.
But I don't know what gets them to this fight. It is really meaningless. No words to say about it. It was horrible. It was horrible war.
The High Commissioner warns this number could rise even more unless there are major global political changes. He says through recent conflicts, there's been a disregard for international humanitarian law and laws of war. And he argues that is terrorizing people and filling them with more fear, which he says is then contributing to more displacement than we've seen ever before. The agency says peace and resolving conflict are the most important things the international community can do to help ease the situation. It also says what might help lower the temperature on the global scale is for countries to stop providing arms and other weapons and create more conditions for stability.
In terms of the situation globally, how can Canadians help? I think it's to continue to be generous in terms of welcoming refugees, and when they do arrive in Canada, to provide those structures so that refugees can properly integrate into society, and to continue to play their role internationally by trying to ensure that that element of burden sharing and responsibility sharing that we talked about is carried out. And Canada has certainly been an exemplar in that respect.
The report says while the U.S. had the largest number of resettled refugees, Canada is not far behind. It says last year, Canada resettled about 51,000 refugees, mainly from Afghanistan, Eritrea, and Syria. Julia Wong, CBC News, London.
Still to come, the queen of power ballads, Celine Dion, sits down with CBC News to talk about her health challenges and her plans for a comeback. Millions of people in southern Florida are under a flood watch after days of torrential rain. And it's not over yet, with more intense thunderstorms expected over the next 24 hours. A state of emergency has been declared in several places along the Gulf and Atlantic coasts, including Sarasota, Fort Myers, and around the Miami area. Flash flooding has turned roads into rivers, stranding drivers, swamping homes, and shutting down schools. Hundreds of flights have also been canceled or delayed. More than a month's worth of rain fell in one day in some places. Local officials are warning people to stay home to avoid being swept away. Darius Madavi joins us now with the BC-wide forecast. Shocking scenes there. And we have severe weather in this country, Darius.
Yes, that's right. Not quite that level of downpour and flooding, but definitely some very heavy rain in parts of Ontario and Quebec today. There were tornado warnings. They have come down now, but you can see this red outline here. Still lots of tornado watches in place. I did see a couple hours ago, it's a very serious situation, but it was very funny. Somebody posted that they had Timbit-size hail coming down, which is probably the most Canadian way to describe the size of hail. So. Yes, exactly. Everybody knows the size of a Timbit, so I thought that made sense. But yes, the storm's going to continue tracking east. You can see they're very organized right now, this line of storms. They should start to become more disorganized as they continue to move over and lose steam overnight as temperatures come back down. So a little bit of excitement over on the East Coast. Here we do, or not East Coast, but over east. Now, over here, not so much excitement. There is some precipitation on the way. There is some cloud, but it's not going to be the miserable weekend I think many of us are expecting. It will be cool. Temperatures probably coming down to around 15 degrees at the as our lowest high, probably on Sunday here in southwestern BC. But again, showers should be coming in and out throughout the day tomorrow. By tomorrow, sort of mid-afternoon, we should have mostly cleared up. It should be mostly dry, except maybe for the parts of the North Shore, and we should start to see some sunshine once again. And actually, through the morning as well, many people will just see mostly cloudy skies, but still some blue sky peeking through there. On Saturday, bit of the same, maybe some more rain expected, but towards the end of the evening, maybe the ability to see a nice sunset because the clouds clear up a little bit more. So again, not going to be a downpour here up on the Central Coast and some other places in the province, especially the interior, which is probably good news. I think everybody can be happy with that. Some more serious rain, some more, not serious, but heavier rain and less showery activity. You can see that there. A nice big pulse of precipitation across the province, which is good news because as we head into next week, especially for southern BC, heading into a bit of a dry stretch. So be ready for that. We are heading into summer, so not unusual. Winds will also be quite heavy, quite strong at times. Going to be very gusty times, and we have actually had a very windy May and beginning of June, which we'll talk more about, I think, tomorrow. For now, though, temperatures, again, we talked about this last hour, but coming down over the next couple days, that's probably going to be the thing that people notice the most here, at least in Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, because it is mostly pretty calm. Some thunderstorm activity, very possible across parts of the province tomorrow, though, so be ready for that. And probably going to come back on Saturday for much of the interior. But for us, Dan, mostly still some sunshine most days.
And now we have a name for our garage band, Gusty Times. Thanks, buddy. She's known as the queen of power ballads, but Celine Dion has not performed in 4 years as she continues to battle a rare neurological disorder. The singer spoke with our Adrian Arsenault about her health struggles, the emotional toll, and her fight to return to the stage. Here's some of their conversation.
At the beginning, it was totally something light that would be, I would say, spasmodically in the throat.
So it started with your voice?
It started in my voice, traveling on tour, and I started to feel a spasm, kind of somebody pressing back. So what it does in the vocal cords is that you feel, not normal, the stress, the panic. I started to compensate because I had a show that night.
Her first symptoms in 2008, going unexplained until a few years ago when she got her diagnosis of stiff person syndrome. Celine Dion hasn't performed for 4 years, has said very little. But when we met near her home in Las Vegas, she explained it has more than interrupted her career, it's threatened her life.
When you get in spasms so much, you don't remember everything. It can last a moment, it can last a few hours. You can break ribs because of the twisting and the spasm.
Maybe you've heard that stiff person syndrome affects 1 in a million people. The thing is, that's not quite right. Celine Dion's doctor says the numbers are more like 2 in 100,000, and they're changing all the time as more people get diagnosed and more people start to understand just what kind of cruel creature this really is.
Why cruel? Well, consider what Celine's doctor, Dr. Amanda Paquette, describes as the triggers setting off the sorts of spasms that have put Celine in hospital.
The triggers that we do see are emotional stress. It could be a positive stress, it could be a negative stress. Areas that are very crowded can trigger spasms. We can see it with light, with noise. So things that stimulate the nervous system.
Light, sound, emotion, everything that's fueled Celine Dion now seems to hurt her. Coping in the early days meant sometimes dangerous doses of Valium. She's learning more about managing the illness now and teaching her sons how to help. But this is a progressive disease that will continue to steal from her. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Las Vegas.
And you can watch the full interview with Celine Dion on our CBC News website. It's also streaming on the National's YouTube page, and there are more exclusive excerpts tonight on the National. Plus, the full interview will air on CBC television tomorrow night at 8 p.m., and we'll replay that for you this weekend on CBC News Network. Around the country in 5 minutes. Coming up, we take you to a classroom where kids are getting a different look at our giant country.
Students from an Ottawa elementary school got a chance this week to crawl and walk over a huge 88 square meter map of Canada.
It's a collaboration between Parks Canada and Canadian Geographic. As Sandra Abma shows us, the giant classroom teaching tool shows the students about national parks.
From coast to coast to coast, grade 6 kids help to unfurl a giant floor map of Canada, designed to take students on a walk through the country's national parks. 88 square meters of geography, waterways, parkland, and historical sites for students to discover underfoot.
We hope that this map is going to inspire kids to learn more about our natural and cultural places and get up close and personal to everything that is Canada.
I want you to go to another side of the map and find me one historic place.
Parks Canada and Canadian Geographic have produced 5 copies of the big map. Teachers across the country will be able to reserve one next September for delivery to their classrooms.
The kit will come with the map itself, a teacher's guide with about 7 different lesson plans that explore different aspects of Canadian geography. It also comes with ropes and pylons that students can use to interact with the map.
A trip to far reaches of the country that doesn't require a plane ticket. Have you ever seen a map like this before?
No. I think it's really cool. I get to see Canada in a lot more detail. Sort of as I did before, I didn't really realize that there was this much.
Here we can see the wild spaces where the provinces, territories, every border, and I think it's really nice.
From one ocean to the other?
Yeah. It feels like I'm teleporting.
Sandra Abma, CBC News, Ottawa.
Very cool map. But now we have to show a map from BC that is slightly larger. And many of you will know this. Let's show it. The Challenger Relief Map, 6,000 square feet, built by George Challenger and his family. It took them 7 years, from 1947 to 1954. It used to be shown at the fair at the PNE. If you remember seeing it as a kid, it is beyond big and such a cool scale. Yeah, there's a man who was washing it, and then they would vacuum it. And it's been in storage for a while, and there's a campaign now to try and get it set up again in its full glory. Very cool to see.
Sometimes when I'm doing the weather for radio, it's helpful to like be able to see all the places and where the mountains are. That would be really helpful. Let's put it in the radio booth. Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Janella Hamilton will have your next local news set for 11 o'clock right after the National. So please join her then.